Blog Talk Radio.
The soul of a woman. The soul of a woman. Whoa. Nothing like the soul of a woman.
Oh, no, 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 no. It's such a strong connection, unlike anything I ever seen. Feels like the right direction. 'Cause you're next to me, love you next to me. The warmth of your affection, I feel it washing over me. You got all my attention. 'Cause you're next to me, love you next to me. And baby, your love is so divine. It's just like paradise. Like the soul of a woman, nothing like the soul of a woman. Oh no, 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 I don't have to ask her. You give me everything I ever need. I'm like a man on a mission. Whoa, whoa. Sometimes I make you mad, we may fuss and fight, but no matter what, we still kiss goodnight. Sleep better when you're in my arms. Oh, yeah. 'Cause baby, your love is so divine. It's just like paradise. And it's the beautiful desire. Girl, you give me life. The one I love. This is my, oh baby, yeah. This is my dedication to the one I love. This is my, yeah. Like the soul of a woman to make you feel going when you feel like giving up. No matter what I'm going through, that's my baby. My baby, my baby, my baby. Nothing like the soul of a woman. Yeah. Ain't got nothing make you feel like million bucks. That's my baby. That's my girl. My baby, my girl. Ain't nothing like the soul of a woman. That's mine, that's mine, that's mine, that's mine. Oh.
Join Barry Barnes for Locker Talk on the Batchelor Network as he presents NFL news and evaluates players. Fridays at 9 a.m. Eastern at blogtalkradio.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce a very interesting young man who's traveled from very far away to be with us tonight.
moment, and he is my man. We can talk about anything. He's got nothing to hide. He's not afraid of his feelings. He's not a slave to his pride. He's giving me love so steady. He touches my heart. Now I'm ready. He touches my soul and my spirit. He's giving me love so steady. So steady. Ooh. Steady love. Ooh. Steady love. I have never met a man that I wanted to be his wife. And then he came along. It's so natural to make a life. 'Cause he's a perfect compliment. 'Cause I'm a boss in my world. But when we're together, he just makes me feel like his girl. He's giving me love so steady. He touches my heart. Now I'm ready. He touches my soul and my spirit. He's giving me love so steady. He puts every other man I've ever known to shame. I just wanna be with him, talk to him, sleep near him, walk with him, be with him. I wanna be lovers and friends and mother his children, make breakfast on Sunday and fight and then make up again. 'Cause if life's gonna be crazy anyway, I wanna do it with you. Steady love. Hey. Ooh. Steady love. He's a good father. He's a good cook. He loves his basketball, and he loves a good book. I'll tell you how I know he's the perfect one for me. 'Cause he's a warrior in the streets, but he's a king in the sheets. He's giving me love so steady. He touches my heart. Now I'm ready. He touches my soul and my spirit. He's giving me love so steady. He's giving me love so steady. He touches my soul and my spirit.
checking in. This is the Batchelor News Radio Show. It's LA Batchelor. Thanks for calling. Got to go to my guest real quick. We're short on time, unfortunately. He is Chief of Police, Little Rock, Arkansas. He is Chief Humphrey. And before I get to you, Chief, Dr. Mansoor, I see you on the line. But Chief, Happy New Year to you, sir.
You too, my brother. You too, and to all the listeners of Pad Nation.
Yes, sir. I just wanted to get you on to talk about policing in 2020. But before we get to that, when you have a situation like we'll talk with Dr. Mansoor in a second, when you have a situation where there are some foreign actors and things that take place in terms of foreign policy, where in this case the U.S. decided to take out a general in Iran, and it's already been talking about not just what and when, but where they're going to attack and retaliate against the United States. Does that put law enforcement locally in cities across the country on a higher alert, or do you share intelligence with the federal level?
Oh, absolutely. Good question. We absolutely do. 9/11 forced that where we are on a sharing, partnership regarding intelligence, whether it's internationally or nationally or internationally. And so we do get those updated information and details regarding threat levels based on intelligence that's being learned from minute to minute. So, based on what happened last week, I think every city's on high alert because you just never know when and where. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. So you have to be on high alert. It has to be a topic of discussion at our briefings and, throughout the police department and also throughout City Hall.
What are the first steps in getting to that point? You talked about, talking to City Hall and having those briefings. What are the first real steps to making sure? And, I mean, you're in Little Rock, Arkansas. Are you looking at sharing intelligence, not just from the federal level, but just state by state, like your nearest state as well?
Oh, yeah. Every state has a Homeland Security partnership with the federal government and also the state. And so, you have directors of Homeland Security, you have emergency management. So those are ongoing discussions that are taking place, not just on the state level, but also on the city level. And, especially being the capital city of Arkansas, those conversations are always occurring. And the fact that we have officers trained in those type of discussions, and they bring information back. So, we're always looking for updates so we can keep this city safe. And also you have to include your governmental leaders in those conversations, because if something does occur, then you have to go into an incident management protocol. And so that's all hands on deck from the mayor or the city manager, from the council members, commissioners, board of directors. Everybody's involved in that process. So everyone has to be familiar with emergency protocols.
Chief, we talking with Chief Humphrey. He is the Chief of Police, Little Rock, Arkansas, here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Two more questions before I let you go. Get to my next guest.
Okay.
The first thing is, how do you treat every threat that comes in? In other words, you're going to get people who legitimately, sincerely will feel like maybe they thought something was suspicious, they saw someone that was suspicious, and how do you go about, making sure that you treat every call, every tip that comes in, and because some of them are going to be false alarms, some of them are going to be, a ruse situation.
Right. LA, that's a great question. I think you have to be able to prioritize And what I see, any threat that comes in should be taken seriously. But there are those that we can handle on a local level, and there are those that we have to hand over to the FBI or our other federal agencies to work, because some of them do fall under the federal jurisdiction. But the majority of them are hoaxes, but, we can't take any chances when it comes to the safety of a community. So we have our own intelligence unit here that works really well with our federal agency. So we're kept real-time information is provided to us. But anytime someone calls and makes a complaint, we follow up on those and then determine what area that they're forwarded to.
Final question. When you look at policing in terms of, and we talked all last year about, doing a better job, law enforcement doing a better job of community policing, getting out there, walking the beat like the old days, and establishing that trust between community and local law enforcement. What would you like to see, and what are steps maybe with the people, at the levels that you are in terms of law enforcement, the steps that they're taking in 2020? What would you like to see moving forward in this climate in particular?
I think consistency. I mean, if you're going to start talking about community policing or 21st century policing, and you're committed to doing that in your community, you have to be consistent. You have to listen to the community members to see what they want. You have to be willing to sit down and listen at the good and the bad and take away from both categories. But the thing is consistency, and make sure your entire department, whatever you're doing, make sure your entire organization is on board, the city government's on board, and mainly the community understands why and what you're doing. And so those are the things you have to, if you're going to do it, you got to be all in. You can't, do it bits and pieces. You got to do it all in order to make it work. And so I'd like to see more consistency, more of the commitment and the consistency.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, people, if consistency will breed trust. If you're consistent across the board, then the community will respect. I mean, most, and you know this, Chief, most people in the community are law-abiding anyway, and they want to tell, on the criminals and drop a dime, if you will, on the criminals. But it does start with that trust. And I think that's one of the biggest concerns people have in these communities, Chief.
And they have a right to have that, because it is, people say we're doing it, and are they really doing it? And so you've got to be consistent, but at the same time, the people at the top have to hold the police chief accountable, and then he has to hold his staff accountable that we're all on the same page. We all can't be doing different things. Exactly.
Chief, I appreciate you. Thanks for your patience this evening, man. God bless. Keep your head up and be safe in what you do, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay, man. God bless you too, and Pad Nation. Take care.
Appreciate it. Chief Humphrey, of course, he is the Chief of Police in Little Rock, Arkansas. Take a 30-second break. Get to Dr. Peter Mansoor, former United States Army officer, military historian, on the pad. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Batchelor News Radio Show. I'm your host, L.A. Batchelor. Excuse me. We thank you for joining us as always. I want to go back to the phones and bring in my next guest. He's a former United States Army officer, military historian, including professor at Ohio State University. He also was the executive officer to General David Petraeus during the Iraq War. He is Dr. Pete Mansoor. And Doc, as always a pleasure to have you on, and Happy New Year to you.
To talk to you again.
Absolutely. So I had to get you on in a scramble because no one saw this coming, where the United States executed Qasem Soleimani, the head of the Iran's elite Quds military force and one of the most powerful figures in the Islamic Republic, killed him last week. This happened last Friday in an airstrike in Baghdad. And thousands of people, Doctor, has mourned him, both in Iraq and Iran. So my question to you is, in doing the research and reading on all of this, two previous administrations considered taking this man out. But they looked at the risk-reward, they looked at the backlash, and decided it wasn't in the best interest. So why now with this administration to do what they did?
So in the past, Qasem Soleimani had arranged the delivery of arms to Shiite militia groups that were then used to kill American soldiers. That happened in the Iraq War. Upwards of 600 soldiers were killed by these explosively formed penetrators. And the issue with targeting Soleimani at the time is he never entered Iraq. It wasn't possible to target him. After our withdrawal from Iraq, it didn't make sense to kill him as an act of revenge because we weren't in active hostilities any longer. He then became a pseudo-ally in the war against ISIS. He was directing the Popular Mobilization Forces, the Shiite militias, against ISIS, so it didn't make sense to target him then either. When it made sense to do so was after a series of Iranian provocations. First, the attacks against shipping in the Gulf, the downing of a U.S. drone, the attacks against Saudi oil facilities. None of those really crossed the red line with the president. But once he started directing Shiite militias in Iraq to once again target U.S. forces with rockets this time, and they killed a U.S. contractor and wounded several soldiers, that crossed the president's red line because blood was shed. And you put on top of that an attack on sovereign American territory, the attack on the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, which was directed by Qasem Soleimani and executed by the militias under his control. So those two red lines were crossed, and the president then, directed that he be taken out. Really, it was an opportunity that I don't know that the administration expected to come, but Qasem Soleimani very boldly just flew into Baghdad International Airport, got in a car, and he was headed to the Green Zone, or presumably to talk to members of the Iraqi government. He was escorted by Mohandas, who was the deputy commander of the Popular Mobilization Forces. So I'm not sure there was any a lot of thought put into this. It was a red line was crossed in the president's mind. He wanted to take action, and this opportunity presented himself, and I don't think there was a lot of thought put into the consequences of what would happen the day after.
And that's where I wanted to go, the consequences. Let me backtrack to the whole point of the execution of this. When you look at over the years, and especially Iraq, so Saddam Hussein, of course, an enemy of the state. Certainly this man by all accounts, is what you're saying and everybody's saying, you don't mourn or grieve for this guy. He was a murderer and killed a lot of people, including Americans, and responsible for thousands of others. But Saddam was, the leader of Iraq. You had Osama bin Laden, who was the sort of not a leader of a country, but a leader of a cause. And then you have this guy in General Soleimani that they're martyring. So talk about the differences between the backlash of this, because this is a general of the state of Iran, as opposed to, say, Saddam Hussein, a enemy of the ideology.
Well, I think,
and I guess what I'm asking you is, Doctor, is that is the backlash going to be worse in this case than it was in Saddam's case and in Bin Laden's case?
Yeah, there was almost no backlash with killing Bin Laden or Baghdadi. They were both terrorist leaders of terror groups that had been dealt serious blows in the war on terror. So I don't think the comparison is there. The comparison between Soleimani is much closer to Saddam Hussein, who was an official of a nation state. Whether they deserve to die or not is almost beside the point. You have to deal with the strategic ramifications of having done the deed. And in the case of Saddam Hussein, Iraq became very chaotic, very violent. Lots of people got killed, and in the end, Iraq ended up. It's still, the jury's not out, but it looks like it's going to be part of the Iranian empire in the Middle East. So it didn't work to our advantage. The question is, was killing Soleimani, will that somehow work to our advantage? The president and his advisors say yes, we'll be safer. But that is a very optimistic assessment at best, because Iran will take revenge for sure. That will lead to U.S. retaliation. And there you go in a series of escalations that could lead to a regional war. And that war could be, very painful for the United States. It'll be devastating to Iran. I don't think they want to go down that route. But I'm not sure they have a choice but to retaliate in some manner. And, they may want to use their proxies or use terrorism or use cyber, but it's going to be pretty transparent if anything happens in the next few months, who is, whose fingerprints are on it. And with this president being as unpredictable as he is, you have no idea what the response is going to be.
So should Americans here be concerned, or should this, as you talked about, the retaliation is coming? It may be now, it might be 10 years from now, but should we be concerned on this soil, or you think that if they do attack, the proxies, that they'll attack embassies and dignitaries across the world?
Yeah, I think there's more danger overseas. Iran has pretty limited capability to launch attacks in the United States. Our intelligence is pretty good. It doesn't mean it wouldn't happen. It certainly could. But I would just go on your daily lives and I think be more wary if you're traveling overseas.
Yeah, I guess with the limitations that Iran would have, but what is the Americans? What does the United States do in terms of U.S. embassies? The Iran already voted to kick out Americans. I think it was 5,000 or whatever out of the country. And if I'm one of that, I'd want to leave anyway at this point. But do you think that they close embassies or just beef up not only the physical presence, but the intelligence?
I think you have to take it country by country. The embassies around the world, by and large, will stay open. I'm not sure about the one in Baghdad. That's probably the embassy that's most at risk. It has closed for the foreseeable future, but we haven't abandoned it. It's well protected. Embassies have been a target ever since Al-Qaeda bombed the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. And there have been a lot of force protection measures taken that has beefed up their security. So, I think that the embassies are probably around the world are probably well positioned to weather this storm, but we'll see.
With Dr. Pete Mansoor, of course, here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Doc, when you look at, you talked about the proxies that Iran may have, but and the limited stretch they can in terms of this soil, but Soleimani has been martyred. So you look at all of the different proxies that he has. Does this make it take a step back from, say, our work in Iraq, trying to get everybody on board, trying to make that a true democracy over there and in other places? And then the follow-up question, or part B of that is, we don't seem to have many friends over there at this point. So again, it goes back to, doing this and then kind of not looking at a plan, with the expectation that Iran is going to retaliate.
Yeah, I think that Iran had three major objectives, and ironically, the killing of Qasem Soleimani might have accomplished all three. The first was to shore up domestic support in Iran for the regime, which was not under threat, but was under pressure from massive protests in recent weeks due to the poor shape of the Iranian economy. And this event has potentially rallied the people in a nationalistic sense around the government to push back against the great Satan, the United States. So that's the first goal. The second goal is they wanted U.S. forces out of Iraq. And as you noted earlier, the Iraqi Council of Representatives voted yesterday to ask U.S. forces to leave. It's unclear whether the current government can act on that because it's a caretaker government. The prime minister has resigned, so you have to wait for a new Iraqi government to take over. It's not a done deal. The 170 votes were all Shiite votes. The Sunnis and Kurds boycotted the proceedings because they want the U.S. forces to stay. So Iraq is split in that regard. But if U.S. forces were to be forced out of the country, that would achieve the second Iranian goal. And the third Iranian goal is to splinter the U.S. alliance in the Middle East, making it easier for Iran to gain hegemony across the region. And if the United States is forced out of Iraq, then the coalition against ISIS would probably dissolve. And again, all three of those things would redound in Iran's favor.
So you get the sense, though, you talked about, Iranians, it seems as though, by all accounts, you can correct me on this, they want a new Iran. They want democracy. They want, they don't want the Ayatollah to be in charge, that whole way of life. Yet they, it's like your family. You talk, you argue amongst each other, but at the end of the day, you're still family. So they have this nationalism. Is it going to cause considerable conflict and devastation, if you will, politically and otherwise, in that country because of this? The Iraqis, the Iranians that are torn between nationalism and democracy.
I don't think it's going to cause conflict in that country. Iran is kind of split along the same rural-urban divide as the United States. The rural people are more religious, more supportive of the government. The urbanites are more secular, and they would like to see more freedom, more changes in the government. So it's not a unitary state by any means. The other thing, as I find almost humorous is recently the Trump administration, and in fact the president, said, "Oh, we don't have any problems with the Iranian people. It's the Iranian regime that's the problem." The Iranian regime turned around recently and said, "Oh, we have no problem with the American people. It's the American government that's the problem." And both sides don't realize that the other side's government has considerable backing from a large segment of the population. And so what we have is an inability for the various administrations in Washington and Tehran to view the other side.
Hold it down.
To view the other side through, through their lens, to look at the other, the way the other would view themselves.
Dr. Mansoor, you look at both Secretary of Defense Mark Esper saying that the U.S. military has no plans to leave Iraq. You have a Secretary of Pompeo saying that Iraqis are dancing in the street now that Soleimani has been executed and he's been killed. What say you about both secretaries and their comments, and in particular the defense secretary? Basically, again, here's the U.S. saying, "Hey, you're not going to dictate anything to us. We did what we're supposed to do. We're not going to back down." Does it sort of entice Iran to do even more in that case? And what about Iraqis dancing in the street because of this?
Yeah, again, it's only, you got to look at who's dancing in the streets, who's mourning Qasem Soleimani. It's a significant portion of the Shiite community, but you've got a significant portion of the rest of Iraq that doesn't like Iran, that has been protesting against Iran recently, that welcomes continued U.S. presence as a lever to keep the Iraqi government from becoming a vassal state of the Iranian Empire. And so pictures and video from the region can be very deceiving. You can have massive protests in the streets. It doesn't mean governments are going to fall. You can have massive demonstrations of mourning for Qasem Soleimani. It doesn't mean the entire nation is mourning his loss. Iraq is a very split electorate, just like the United States is very divided. And so you have to understand the region before you make assessments based on what's happening in the streets.
Right. So are you saying that Secretary Pompeo doesn't understand, what's going on in Iraq when he makes that statement? Well,
they have to say what's politically prudent to say. He can't admit, "Oh, we've made a mistake. We're going to consider leaving now." No, they're going to say the party line, which is, we have a relationship with Iraq. It's in Iraq's interest to have U.S. forces training its army, which is true. It's in Iraq's interest to have U.S. counterterror operatives targeting ISIS, which is true. So we're not going anywhere. It would be foolish for one of the secretaries to come out and say, "Oh yeah, just because the Iraqi Council of Representatives voted to kick us out in a non-binding resolution, we're going to leave."
Yeah. Well, final question for you, and I appreciate your time. What's next? I mean, we know Iran's going to retaliate at some point, but what's next in the short term with this crisis, and maybe what you expect long term?
Yeah,
both in terms of political and diplomacy.
I think we're in a holding pattern until if and when Iran retaliates. We're also in a holding pattern to see if there's a new Iraqi government. And those are the two issues that are next up on the docket: Iranian retaliation and whether a new Iraqi government would follow through on the non-binding resolution to have U.S. forces removed from the country. Longer term, there's going to be an election in the United States. And what happens in November is going to have huge impact on what happens in the Middle East. And you'll have other guests on between now and then who can prognosticate as well as I can on what the chances are of a new government in Washington. But if there is, that would change things significantly. If the Trump administration gets a second term, then buckle up, because it's going to be a rough ride.
Ooh, well, for me, just in this whole crisis, if you will, I hope he doesn't get a second term. Doc, as always, sir, I appreciate you coming on. Happy New Year to you and your family. Thank you for your time, as always.
Yeah, thanks, L.A. Happy New Year to you, too.
Thank you. Dr. Pete Mansoor, former United States Army officer and military historian, who the executive officer to General David Petraeus during the Iraq War, joining us talking about the crisis in Iran with the U.S. Stay tuned on the Batchelor News Radio Show. And welcome back to the show. We thank you for joining us here on the Batchelor News Radio show. Want to go back to the phones, bring in my good friend, of course, longtime friend and colleague and editor of Black Athlete Sports Network. He's Tony T. Mac McLean. T, Happy New Year to you, sir.
Happy New Year, sir. How are you?
Good. As we wait for Lut Williams, hopefully we'll get Lut on. I wanted to just take a look back at Wild Card Weekend. And to me, people won't believe it, but if they listen back to the broadcast, I was 4 for 4. And the reason being is that there were a couple teams I thought were weak going into the weekend, and then there was a couple teams that I thought could upset. Let's start with the first game in Buffalo at Houston. Houston was the one team I thought at home that would hold serve simply because of the quarterbacks. One quarterback in his first playoff who's still learning, who I still think is vastly overrated.
And it showed.
And it showed against a quarterback that doesn't get enough credit, meanwhile running for his life because he don't have an offensive line, but yet he still gets it done. Your thoughts on that game?
Well, again, I'm like you, because you had both strong defenses. Probably Buffalo's a little bit stronger, but Watson, if it came down to the quarterbacks, you knew Watson was going to be the one that would prevail. Allen showed signs, but to me the jury is a little still out on him. It's funny. He is applauded for running, while Watson is sort of they sort of go after him because he runs. It just goes back. It goes back and forth. It really does. It really goes back and forth with ridiculous, really in a ridiculous sort of fashion. But Houston was the better team. Buffalo. They've got to add some offensive weapons before they can really be a contender. I feel contender for the league as opposed to the division. I think they can. I think they were the better team, even though I think they were the better team. They were the best team in that division, even though the Foxborough boys won the division.
And this is what doesn't get said about Deshaun Watson is that he's a winner. See, I think that's so underrated, especially at that position. Especially with it, even more underrated when it comes to the black quarterback. The guy's been winning in high school. He won a national championship in college. He's a winner, and he's a leader, and he shows that. If you ask all the teammates and his coaches, at least in Houston and certainly in Clemson, that this guy knows what it takes and has what it takes to win. The second part of his game that they don't give credit for is this guy is Michael Vick on steroids, where he can scramble, run the ball, and I think he's even more accurate than Michael Vick down the field. He throws a bomb on a dime, on the run, and those are the two things that he doesn't get credit for.
Plus he has arguably the best wide receiver in the game with Hopkins, and they were able to win without the other strong wide receiver playing as well. So, if they ever develop some sort of a consistent running game, I think they're going to be even more dangerous than they are. But he's been sort of doing it with less weapons the last few years, and I think that's why that they've had their ups and downs postseason wise.
Yeah, and not only that, if you're just joining us, we're talking some NFL recap here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. Not only that, he still doesn't have the protection he needs on his backside. I don't know what this organization is doing and why they can't seem to get it right, but he's always getting hit from behind or scrambling with someone chasing him from behind because they don't have enough protection for him on that side of the line. The left tackle and the left guard seem to be struggling a lot. And when he rolls to his right, there's always someone either in front of him or running behind him. So kudos to them. They move on to take on Kansas City. We'll talk about that later. The second game, the AFC pitted the New England Patriots at home against a Tennessee Titan team that I just thought if Derrick Henry went off, they would win going away. Certainly the officiating and the referees try to make it close. There was some BS calls in there, but we're not surprised by that because they want to get New England back to the Super Bowl, but that's not happening. But Tennessee came in solid. The defense played well enough that they bend but don't break. They made plays. And, I've said before with this Patriots team, you can't Edelman your way to a Super Bowl. It's not going to happen. You can't have a slot receiver at 5'9" that's going to, slot his way to a Super Bowl. And Tom Brady looks that I've heard so many people, all these so-called experts, Tony, no surprise to you and I, talk about he still got game and I didn't see any wear and tear. I didn't see any drop off. He should come back and all this other. Bottom line is New England is toast, and I hope their dynasty is toast.
It's been dying a slow death over the last few years, even with the appearances in the Super Bowl. I think it just speaks more of just how awful that division is, more than anything else. And plus, unfortunately, they've gotten, it's tough. Like I always say, it's tough. 11 versus 18 is always tough in that regard. But even the refs couldn't save them because when you have to be propped up like that so many times, at some point it comes back to haunt you. And I think this is the Miami game was probably as much of a wake up call as it should have been. But again, because the media, and everyone else just lusts over them, this is what winds up happening because. Tennessee didn't really Tennessee didn't really have to do anything that they haven't been doing all year. They fed Henry. They basically let Tannehill Tannehill just got the hell out of the way, except for a couple of stupid throws down the road there. But it's they're probably another team that. If they were able to shore up a few little things, they could be, they could be, I don't, they're not going to go far with Tannehill, a quarterback. But when you've got a Henry back there, it sort of covers all the warts.
Well, and that's a big reason to think that they can go. Before we get to Lut, when you look at Brady. Going back to him, does he have enough to play next year, and will he be in a Patriot uniform? He already said it's highly unlikely that he will retire. So what do you think?
It wouldn't surprise me if he plays, but not with the Patriots. Because if the Patriots are consistent, they usually let go guys a year before that everybody thinks they will. I think they'll get rid of him, and I think they'll just I think he'll get the Lawyer Tillman, Richard Seymour, who were some of the other guys they let go early. I think if they're consistent, they'll let him go early, but we'll see. Me personally, I think. I suppose I'm seeing a lot of last year of Peyton Manning things with him.
Yeah, and it'll be kind of weird, but a lot of people are saying, he may go to San Diego. He's a California kid and that kind of thing. And Chargers needed, they're going in a new stadium, but there's all speculation. I think that I agree with you. I don't believe he'll be back with the Patriots. I think if anything else, is Belichick's ego will say, let's not bring him back, and I'm going to show you I can win without him. And I think that's been going on for years between the two of them anyway, so we shall see. I want to switch gears and bring in the editor and publisher of the Black College Sports page. He is Lut Williams, and Happy New Year to you, sir.
Thanks, L.A. Same to you and the guys. Good to be back with you.
Yep. Absolutely. I want to look at the CIAA first and the hoops, but before we go into that, I want you to kind of reflect on the football season and some of your storylines of 2019, maybe some players or some coaches or some situations that, if you look back at 2019, you can make it HBCU sports in general, whether it be track and field or football, but some of the storylines from 2019.
Yeah, it's easier for me to concentrate on kind of football since it's just finished. If you go back to actually, my years kind of run from August to July rather than from calendar years. So it's easier for me to talk about what just was completed or what happened in the last 5 months of the year. And the football season obviously was a great season, a little unusual in this sense that the best team with the best record in two of the conferences, that's the MEAC and the SIAC, both were banned from the postseason. Savannah State had the best record in the SIAC, but because they moved down from the MEAC and FCS football to Division II, they were not eligible to play in a championship game or in any kind of postseason play in the SIAC. And in the MEAC, Florida A&M beat both North Carolina A&T and South Carolina State, the two co-champions in terms of their records. A&T ended up getting the Celebration Bowl bid because of its head-to-head win over South Carolina State. But under ordinary circumstances, had Florida A&M not self-imposed postseason bans as well as not being eligible for the MEAC championship, it would have been Florida A&M and Alcorn State rather than North Carolina and North Carolina A&T and Alcorn State. So in that sense, I don't think it distracted from the year. There were some great individual performances. I think that probably the most outstanding was North Carolina A&T running back Jermaine Martin, who ran for 1,400 yards plus. I think he might even gotten to 1,500. But more importantly, he had 23 rushing touchdowns, and 10 of them were of 55 yards or more. And we've come to get used to that here in Greensboro, where I live, but it was under when Tariq Cohen was the guy breaking off those long runs. But Jermaine Martin, even though he is nothing like Tariq in terms of size, had his share, like I said, 10 of 55 yards or more, including 84-yarders and 64-yarders and 74-yarders. And then he broke another 60-plus yard one in the Celebration Bowl. He's a person you got to keep your eye on. He's putting up the kind of numbers and having the kind of effect on games and on the field that got Tariq Cohen drafted in the fourth round in his third year now in the NFL. So, interestingly, I don't think that there were any there are a bunch of good athletes on the HBCU level that will probably get some looks. None of them are projected like Titus Howard was last year out of Alabama State to go as high as the first round, at least in terms of the few projections that I've looked at right now. But there are several intriguing guys that the pro scouts like that may get a shot to be drafted come draft day in the NFL. So, I mean, basically, I thought the season was interesting, to say the least. We had a team go through the regular season undefeated in Bowie State, and not surprising to me, they fell out in the first round of the Division II playoffs because even though they had a quarterback who was a player of the year, he was not a mere haul in terms of being very deft at reading defenses. He was more of an athlete and took advantage of his athletic ability. So it was an interesting story in terms of Bowie State and the CIAA. And the team out of the SWAC was Alcorn State, who has become now the standard bearer. Their third trip to the Celebration Bowl, their sixth straight East Division championship. So I thought the football season was great. And can I comment about you talking about Tom Brady? If Tom Brady leaves New England and goes somewhere, I think it'll be like Brett Favre in a Minnesota Vikings uniform and Joe Montana in a Kansas City Chiefs uniform, in that he may be still good and he'll still be Tom Brady, but he won't be Tom Brady with the New England Patriots. So it's going to be interesting as because I did hear you guys before you brought me on talking about whether Brady's going to leave.
Yeah, and I was thinking about that. You know, Montana and Kansas City. He burned our Steelers that playoff year, and he did. And then of course, as you mentioned, when you look at it, I mean, the only difference is I just, you know, Montana even at that age was a lot more mobile than Tom Brady. Like he could scramble. Yeah, Brady's not gonna scramble or anything. It depends on where he goes. You know, if he can have that kind of success.
But the bottom line, LA, is that he's Tom Brady. Like Tom Brady was to this era what Joe Montana was to his era, and maybe to a similar degree to Brett Favre was to his era. They were the premier quarterbacks. They took their teams consistently to the playoffs and performed well in the playoffs, won Super Bowls. All of them did. I mean, nobody's won as many as Brady, obviously. But when you get rid of a Montana, or you get rid of a Favre, or you get rid of a Brady, I mean, it's like, is this the same world we're living in? It's like Tom Brady in another uniform, Brett Favre in a Vikings uniform, and he played 1 year, I think, with somebody else.
The Jets.
And Montana and the Jets. I mean, Montana and a Chiefs uniform. It's like, what is that? You know, it's like Roethlisberger. Where's he gonna go when we decide we don't want to pay $38 million next year for him? Where's he gonna go? You know. So I mean, all of these guys of that ilk are getting old, but nobody. I would only compare maybe Favre and Montana in terms of the success that they had and the dominant teams that they were with them at quarterbacks, and having to, see if they could do it on another level. And I think you said Belichick wants to prove that he can win without Brady, and Brady wants to prove he can win without Belichick. So we'll see. Should be interesting.
Yeah. Just joining us, we'll talk with Lut Williams, publisher of the Black College Sports page here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. And Lut, just taking a look at the CIAA, you look at the Northern Division. No one's played, if I'm not mistaken, a division game, but they played conference games. And, we talked about these teams before the season started. The Virginia schools off to a good start, certainly in the conference. Virginia Union in particular, winners of 7 in a row. As of this broadcast, and Bowie and Elizabeth City State off to just a slow start, but they've only played 3 games. But talk about the Northern Division thus far and what you've seen.
Yeah, well, what I've seen so far is that the CIAA is going to be ultra competitive. I think right now we have no idea who is going to emerge from the pack. I mean, Fayetteville State got off to a 10-0, 11-0 start. They've lost a couple of games. Virginia State, who has been the kind of standard bearer for the last couple of years, has already dropped a couple of games. So I think that there's a power shift going on. Some new coaches. Luke DeLessio left North Carolina Central, and Lavelle Moulton to take the head coaching job at Fayetteville State. Let me tell you, Luke DeLessio spent a decade or so at Bowie State. And one of the things that he did, and he's done the same thing for Lavelle Moulton down in North Carolina Central, is that he goes out and gets players. And he gets players primarily Division I transfers. That's how he built the program at Bowie State. He's doing the exact same thing at Fayetteville State in his first year. And look, keep your eye peeled, because if cats start leaving the MEAC that are playing significant minutes, I've already heard some rumors about some people who are looking to go down to Fayetteville State, because their mentality is you play at Fayetteville State, you can play loose. You can hoop, as they say. You're not playing structured. So I would not be surprised to see not just Fayetteville State, not just Luke Lesio, but maybe in the CIAA, that's going to become the thing, because there's so many people entering the transfer portal, so many Division I guys who are very talented, who can't get on the floor for whatever reason, that don't want to stick around. I think the CIAA is going to be some landing spots. But as you said, Sean Walker returning to Elizabeth City, that's a very interesting development in the CIAA North. Obviously, Lonnie Bloom still at Virginia State. They've struggled a little bit, lost some games that they've been winning the past couple of years. And Jay Butler at Virginia Union, if I was looking right now, and again, I think Bowie State, as in terms of those four, I think are probably the class of the Northern Division. But don't even rule out Lincoln. Lincoln has played well and has been on the verge of getting some big wins. So I think the biggest thing I've seen when I scanned over the scores in the CIAA, that it's going to probably be more competitive this year. It's not going to be Virginia State head and shoulders perhaps above everybody else in the conference. I think they've kind of kept up with Sean Walker returning to Elizabeth City and Luke D'Alessio at Fayetteville State. I think that we're going to see some very interesting matchups. Even Cleo Hill Jr. down at Winston-Salem State is I think is going to make some noise. So I think the CIAA is probably going to be more competitive in this last year for the CIAA tournament in Charlotte than it's been for a while.
Luke, before I go to TMAC, in the Southern Division, you talked about D'Alessio and what he's doing and what he can do at Fayetteville State, and obviously you look at Livingstone as always is talented and is going to be there. But Claflin has gotten off to a good start. They're under 500 overall, but they've gotten off to a good start in the division thus far. Is that are they a product of competitiveness based on coming from the SIAC, or they have a very talented team?
No, they have a very talented coach. Their coach, and his particular name escapes me, but their athletic director is actually a CIAA guy. Jerome Fitch was a former head coach at Johnson C. Smith, and I believe at one other CIAA school. He was one of the people that was campaigning very hard to get Claflin, who doesn't play football, to come over to a more basketball-centric conference like the CIAA. And they actually pulled it off now that they've been in the conference a couple of years. First of all, they have a good coach. That's number one. Number two, they probably had a more competitive team when they first came into the conference. In fact, they came off of winning the SIAC the year before they came and actually going to the Division II playoffs. They were one of the two Panther squads, along with Clark Atlanta, that advanced to the playoffs the year before they came to the CIAA. So, no, I think that Claflin is going to be, and I haven't seen Claflin. I've seen Livingstone. I'm familiar with the Livingstone team. I'm familiar with the Winston-Salem State team. I'm getting familiar with the Fayetteville State team primarily because they have a couple of local guys from Greensboro, where I live, who played here in high school, who were highly recruited. One that was recruited by A&T, and one that was recruited by a lot of mid-majors. I mean, a lot of not even mid-majors. The kid, his name is Jalen, I think it's Jalen Seegers. And I didn't check the stats to see if he's leading the CIAA in scoring. He had a 39-point game. I think he had 28 a couple of days ago. He is a Division I talent that is now at Fayetteville State. Jalen Spicer is a little left-handed point guard that was recruited by A&T, got in a little trouble about a year and a half ago, did not come to A&T. Lo and behold, he lands at Fayetteville State. And this is the kind of move that Luke D'Alessio is known for. When he was at Bowie State, Luke D'Alessio had three starters that were like 24, 26, and 27 years old. So some cats have been in the military and come out of the military. So he is going to go get players. Fayetteville State is going to be a player in the CIAA upper echelon for the time being, because he knows how to attract people. Fayetteville State is a nice program, a nice school, a nice facility, a nice campus. I'm sure that Fayetteville State is going to be a force to be reckoned with in short order in the CIAA.
Yeah, it's got to be interesting. I'm pleased so far in what the Southern Division is doing. And I think playing within their division now is going to help them in conference play. To me, more than say the Northern Division is just kind of playing conference and not beating each other up yet in the division. But we'll see how that plays off. Talking with Lut Williams, of course, here on the Batchelor News Radio Show, 646-929-0130, the number to get in touch with us, +1. Pad Nation, hit us up on Facebook, Pad Nation 2 on Twitter. With that, I go to my good friend, co-host, and colleague, Tony T. Mack.
Lut, thanks for joining us as always. Talk about that FAMU win over Iowa State a little while back and how important that could be for them and just for HBCU hoops for this season.
Well, Tony, I saw that result, and I can say on the one hand I'm not surprised. It didn't motivate me a lot. I don't really know Iowa State. I don't know Iowa State, how they're projected to finish in their conference. But I got a good friend, and you all may know Dr. Kevin Butler. Dr. Kevin Butler said to me about 6 or 8 months ago, he said, Lut, I predict in 5 years that an HBCU team is going to win the Division I NCAA basketball championship. I told Dr. Butler he had lost his mind. That I didn't think that would happen. But he is he's kind of reading the tea leaves. His mentality is this: if Virginia can lose in the first round as a number 1 seed 1 year and then win the national championship with basically the same team the next year, he said things are changing in college basketball. And one of the things that's changing is that the talent level, remember, Virginia didn't have one and dones. Virginia had guys who had been there 2 and 3 years. I think even Hunter, the guy who ended up being a first-round pick, was his third year there. And what Kevin is saying is that the Lavelle Motons and Johnny Joneses of Texas Southern and other HBCU Division I teams are going to eventually pull together enough good players or very good players to actually make some noise in the NCAA tournament. They're saying if Virginia can get knocked off as a number 1 seed, that other 16s and 15s, which is like the perennial place where the HBCUs are seated, are going to make similar kinds of runs. And he thinks that in the next 5 years. Now, I have not agreed with him, but when I see a game like FAMU, it's probably nobody of the biggest HBCU fans, the biggest MEAC fans that can tell me who's the best player for FAMU, because the lineups change so often, and the best teams in the MEAC, for example, and in the SWAC for that matter, I write, Tony, Street and Smith's previews for the MEAC and the SWAC, and my stories are due in June about basketball. By the time September rolls around, the guys the coaches, it's like who are these guys?
Different roster. Yeah, it's a complete different roster.
The guys that I've said that they're going to rely on the most, it's like they are on the bench. They number 7 on the bench. They deep on the bench, because this frenzy of transfers has just changed the landscape. So I think what Dr. Butler is saying is that it's only a matter of time before the right coach at the right school starts to attract the right players, with the Jamel Hill columns and the other kinds of things, telling people like, why aren't they going to HBCU? Why don't they come to an A&T or North Carolina Central or Texas Southern or Jackson State and make those runs and get that money to be coming into those coffers? That it's a possibility. I don't think it will happen. So my point to you is that when FAMU beats Iowa State, I think it's it's a part of that trend. Now that's not to say that upsets like that don't happen every year. We usually have 2 or 3 of those. When we start to see more of those, Tony, when we start to see 6 or 7 of those, 7 or 8 of those. I mean, last year Texas Southern knocked off 3 ranked teams, and they ended up making it all the way to the Final Four of one of the postseason tournaments with a team from transfer. So anyway, that's the trend as I see it happening. So when I see FAMU knock off Iowa State, I'm not surprised. Do you know who Iowa State's players are? Because I don't.
I don't think Iowa State knows who Iowa State's players are. I think at this point in time this year. But yeah, it's and you talk about the transfers because, and especially in the MEAC where you basically had the 2-time Player of the Year transfer to UConn, and you see, and like you said, you see so many others along the way, basically do that transfer portal. Does it, I guess you may have answered the question already, but big picture wise, do you think it will help the HBCUs, or will the cherry picking from some of these other Division I schools eventually, in the long run hurt them?
Well, but the point that you made about R.J. Cole leaving Howard, going to UConn, that's happening as much as the Centrals and the A&Ts are bringing in new crops of players every year to stack their roster from Division I. What's happening also, and I told you I did a little 3-part piece called Traveling Men, talking about how much now the UConns, the Tennessees, the Xaviers are rating the HBCU ranks for their talented players. They look at the HBCU ranks. They see who are the players of the year, all conference players in the SWAC and the MEAC, and they go after them saying, hey, wouldn't you like to play on the bigger stage? Wouldn't you like to play on TV? Wouldn't you like to let more scouts see you that is coming to your games in the little gym at Morgan State or the little gym at Coppin State? You can come to Tennessee and play in front of 18,000. You can come to UConn and play in front of 15,000. So it's going both ways. So does it help the HBCUs? Yes, because when you bring in coaches like Morgan State hired the coach who was an assistant in Maryland, and I don't know if you noticed this week the twins, the 6'10" twins who signed with Maryland were recruited by the coach that's now at Morgan State for Maryland. They didn't make it through half a season at Maryland before they said they're transferring, and everybody's saying that they're going to end up at Morgan State. And what his name? His name is Kevin. Kevin Grotus is the head coach of Morgan State. Grotus has been a recruiter for Georgetown. He was previously, before taking the Morgan State job, a recruiter for Maryland. Maryland's a top 25 team. 2 6'10" twins that already have departed Maryland already. I mean, we barely in January, and they said we through with Maryland. Look for them to come to Morgan State. And let me tell you, Kevin Grotus, who is a Bowie State graduate, who had these major Division I assistant coach jobs, he is going to do what Luke DeLessio is doing at Fayetteville State. He's going to have him primetime players at Morgan State. Give him a year or two. You're going to see not just these 6'10" twins. I predict they're going to be at Morgan State, but I predict that he's going to get other kids that he would ordinarily send to Maryland, bringing them to Morgan State, saying, look, we can come to Morgan State. Morgan State historically has beaten Maryland. I don't know if you remember. They beat Gerard Mustaf. They beat Maryland one year. Gerard Mustaf said, now, Morgan State's in Baltimore, and University of Maryland College Park. But Gerard Mustaf said, who is Morgan State? Where is it? I never heard of them before. So thank you very much, Gerard Mustaf. Morgan State whipped them. So I'm saying Kevin Grotus. So your point was, does it help? Absolutely it helps, because what it says is that they can compete with the people in the Big Ten and in the ACC and these other big conferences. And if Kevin Grotus and Kenny Blakeney up at Howard and all of these other kids start to get some of these big-time players, look out. Maybe Kevin Butler's prediction will come true.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Lou, just to follow up on the level of play from HBCUs, but take it to the NBA. I've been pleasantly surprised, but I've seen this kid play. We've all seen him play at Norfolk State and Kyle O'Quinn. Got an NBA, went overseas, come back playing really well for the Sixers. He's a dominant force inside. So what's the future of players like him? Not necessarily the size and those things, but guards and forwards playing the 2 or 3, whatever, that they start to matriculate and start to infest the NBA. Maybe not go straight from, an HBCU to the NBA, but play in the D League or go, overseas and come in, because he is an example of hard work and dedication, and he's a very talented kid.
Yeah, and a kid who was not projected to be an NBA prospect when he came out. I think he had 2 offers when he came out of high school. He blossomed at Norfolk State. There was an environment that allowed him to become better over the 4 years he spent there. Right now in the NBA, I think there are 4 players. There's Robert Covington out of Tennessee State. There's O'Quinn. Right. There's Stanton Kidd, who is on the Utah roster. Stanton Kidd he played at North Carolina Central and then transferred out to Colorado State, I think it is, and has worked his way up through the minor leagues and made the last cut for Utah. I haven't really checked his stats to see how much he's playing, but he's a very athletic, talented kid. That they decided they wanted to keep him. And it's one other player whose name escapes me right now, the 4th player I think that's in the league. But a kid like Amir Hinton of out of Shaw University is playing with the G League, Westchester, the Knicks G League team. He's a guy to keep your eye on. He's had several double-figure outings. I think the last I checked, he was averaging about 13 points per game.
They need to bring him up yesterday, Luke. To be quite honest, I've seen the kid play.
The Knicks can use all the help they can get. But but in terms of that, the Kyle O'Quinn are rare these days. Again, the NBA, the HBCUs will start getting some NBA draft picks. Kyle Quinn worked his butt off in 4 years and really turned himself into an NBA player. And if you ask him, he'll tell you he had no idea he could even play in the NBA. He was just a big kid that could block shots, play defense, found out he could shoot, and by the time he left the MEAC, he was the player of the year, defensive player of the year, and ended up getting drafted in the 2nd round, and now I think he's in his 7th or 8th year in the NBA. So I don't know how many of those we're seeing. I don't see anybody right now. You got to do like what Amir Hinton did, which is lead the country in scoring, to put your name in that kind of place. We'll see what R.J. Cole does when he goes up to UConn. The last guy out of the MEAC that had that kind of rep was Jay Bird Daniel out of Howard and led the nation in scoring. And he went to Tennessee, and he could only get about 10 to 12 minutes a game. But he led the nation in scoring at Howard. So we'll have to see. I don't see anybody right now on the horizon, but there's some kids that I think that are very talented. But you got to have a combination of size, and playing ability. Like Central has a kid, Mel Blunt's son, Jabri Blunt, is a very talented kid. I've been trying to figure out for the last 2 years why Lavelle Moulton didn't use him more often. Now he's become their scoring leader. He's very strong, but he's kind of a tweener. Whether he's going to get a look, I doubt it, because he has to play almost power forward at 6'5" for North Carolina Central, and there ain't many 6'5" power forwards in the NBA these days.
That's a tough one. Before you go and I get to Doc Walker, any games to watch, some matchups to watch in HBC hoops this weekend? Or this week, I should say.
Well, actually, I'm sitting outside the A&T gym. They're playing their first MEAC game of the season. I don't even know exactly who they're playing. LA. What I'm trying to do, being here in North Carolina, I got to get to some of these CIAA games. Livingstone. I want to see Johnson C. Smith. I want to see Shaw and St. Aug have not made a lot of noise so far. And I said I'm going to see A&T. I'm sure you've heard about the little controversy at A&T. Their head coach has been indefinitely suspended at A&T, and interim coach Will Jones is coaching the Aggies tonight in their first conference game. So there's a lot of tension here at A&T after all of the big celebration with the win in the bowl game. Before they could get back home and celebrate, their coach, Jay Joyner, has been indefinitely suspended. I know some details about it. None of it has come out publicly, but it really involved some stuff internally in terms of how he was handling players that's got him suspended. And kind of the jury's out right now whether he's going to come back or not, or whether they're going to move on from him. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, I'm going to talk with you off air about that, and we'll go on air when we get a chance and get all the details. But, Lut, as always, Happy New Year to you, my friend. God bless, be well. We'll talk with you next week, sir.
Thanks for having me, L.A. Appreciate it, man.
You're welcome. Lut Williams, publisher of the Black College Sports page. Talk some HBCU hoops. Going to take a 30-second break. Come back with Rick Doc Walker. He's a color commentary for the ACC College Football Game of the Week. Also does his thing with the co-host of Inside the Locker Room and has his own show. A lot of stuff going on with him. We'll talk with him on the Batchelor News radio show. Stay tuned. Thanks to all of our guests, Humphrey Chief of Police in Little Rock, Arkansas, Dr. Peter Mansoor, talking foreign affairs, the fallout of the Iran-U.S. conflict there, and of course just heard from Lut Williams in our second hour, publisher of the Black College Sports page here on the Batchelor News radio show. I want to go back to the phones and bring in our next guest who's been on before. We appreciate him. Color commentary for the ACC College Football Game of the Week. Co-host of the Inside the Locker Rooms, weekdays from 1 to 4 on the Team 980 in Washington. And, of course, he's the host of Doc Walker's ProView on Tuesdays at 11 p.m. He is Rick Doc Walker. And, Doc, always a pleasure to have you on as L.A. Batchelor alongside my good friend Tony T-Mac McClain.
L.A., always good to be back, man. We got to update the bio, that ACC deal. I've been out of that about 7 years now.
Oh, man, you got to get that.
I did it for 14, yeah. But I did it for 14. But I love college ball. But, doing the burgundy and gold now and Doc and Galdi, we're on 10 a.m. to 1 Eastern time for your listeners that want to ride that train with us.
Absolutely. Let me get your thoughts, too, on tonight's game. At the time of this broadcast, you look at Clemson and LSU. Clemson, I thought, was fortunate, the talent, but definitely fortunate to have some calls go their way to get past Ohio State. Meanwhile, LSU, I think everybody thought they beat Oklahoma, and they beat Oklahoma soundly. Who do you think wins this game, though, LSU and Clemson?
Well, it's like the Super Bowl. When you get down to this point, you got the best two teams in college football. And I know Ohio State feels like they let it get away, but that's the beauty of having the Clemson Tigers, who haven't lost since I had an afro. I mean, it's really interesting what Debo has done with his team. But the Tigers, for years, just needed a quarterback. They were like the headless horse. They had everything, but they just could not advance the football. Now they have him. So they're riding high. But, Clemson, when you come in there as the defending champions and you haven't lost a game, now granted, the ACC was soft conference this year, but Ohio State's not soft, and they won the game. And so it's really going to be interesting to see what happens. Turnovers usually control the tempo of a game like this, but I'm just looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it should be an exciting game. I just think, too, that, Clemson, Ohio State, the way LSU has been playing offensively with those wide receivers and running back, that quarterback who's the Heisman Trophy winner, it's going to be interesting to see what Clemson defensively can do against that LSU offense. Nobody's been able to slow them down all year. Want to switch gears to the Washington team, and boy, there's a lot of excitement, Doc, around this team when you look at a young quarterback that showed some very good signs of poise in the pocket, making plays down the field, staying in there, taking some hits, but getting it done. And you bring in a guy who demands respect, who, was a solid player when he played, a good defensive coordinator. He made a name for himself there, and then took a Carolina team to the Super Bowl, winners of the division multiple times. So he comes in with a resume that's very successful. How excited should fans be there, and your thoughts personally on this hire? He's not some huge splash, but he demands the respect, and he has the success to show.
Well, LA is what we needed. We needed stability on defense. I mean, when you're dead last on third down annually, we got too much talent to be this dysfunctional. And so with Durant, Payne, Ioannidis, Allen, Tim Settle, we got some horses up front. And they got Sweat out of Mississippi State, who has a lot of activity, but never really learned any moves. We were playing the 3-4. They had him dropping in coverage. They had him Ryan Kerrigan dropping in coverage, and it was a waste of time. We need to put pressure on the quarterback. I like what the San Francisco 49ers done. Shanahan is brilliant offensively, but defensively, man, they sick dogs after you. I mean, they send them in waves. They're athletic, they're fast, they play fast, and they stop the run on the way to the quarterback. So even though the rules have softened the game, the key is still get to the quarterback, and I think you'll see a marked improvement with our defense next season.
What about the organization standpoint? Snyder has been known as being too hands-on, not maybe making the right decisions. We've had, as a carousel of quarterback coaches there. How is that going to work? Even you mentioned the word dysfunctional, and that was what I was thinking in terms from the ownership and operations down to the coaching level. Differences on who's going to be drafted, who's going to play. Even the trainer, I understand, of 2 decades almost, the way that ended was kind of dysfunctional. So how is that going to work with Snyder and this coach?
Only time will tell. I mean, it's 10 coaches in 21 years. So, we're not. That's just fact. That's what it is. They have not made great decisions when it comes to football. And hopefully Rivera will be given the power to do his own thing. That's the only way it'll work. We can't fail any more than we've done. So now, hopefully, they're tired of them. We had a lot of empty seats in our stadium, which is unbelievably rare, but it's a reality. And it's now time for a new voice. And hopefully Ron, Jack Del Rio, the guys that land on offense will be able to stabilize. They have good young talent. We played more rookies than anybody in football. If you're going to lose, I want to lose with you. I don't want to have an aging team. They got a young team. And so there's a chance they can get Trent Williams back, which would be great if Trent's willing to play for what they offer him. And, Adrian Peterson is a freak of nature. Guy showed a lot of promise. He just can't keep his body intact, but, that maybe that ends next year. So we got a lot of possibilities, but it don't mean squat. If you don't get back to playing fundamental football, we make too many mistakes, blown coverages, people doing their own thing. So we needed a defensive presence and a disciplinarian. And I think between Del Rio and Rivera, we're moving in the right direction.
And I think, too, before I go to Tony, you make a great point with Jack Del Rio. Not only defensive coordinator experience, but head coaching experience. So that I think it allows Ron Rivera to focus in on being the manager, if you will. With the good delegation. We'll check on the offensive side in a bit. We'll talk with Doc Walker here on the Batchelor News Radio Show. If you have a question, hit us up at 646-929-0130 or hit us up on Facebook at Pad Nation, Pad Nation 2 at Twitter. With that, I go to my good friend and co-host, Tony T. Mac McClain.
Hey, Doc. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, T.
You saw what happened up the road with Baltimore when they made the commitment to Jackson. Basically, letting them know during off season you're going to be the guy. We're going to tailor everything around you, and you saw the fruits of that. I think Haskins, if Washington is willing to make the commitment, they can have the same similar sort of outcome with him. First of all, who are they bringing in for offensive coordinator? And also, do you think that he can be a kid that within maybe a year or two can be up there in that same stratosphere with Jackson?
Well, it's not fair to compare anybody to Jackson. I've never seen anybody as dynamic as Jackson. And I felt that way at Louisville. And most of the, quote, experts didn't see him at quarterback. Harbaugh is a visionary. The Ravens are. They're just a very well-run organization. So Dwayne's a different guy. I mean, he's a 6'5" guy with a powerful arm, more like Roethlisberger. And he can make plays. He was athletic. I think this offseason, if I was one of his advisors, I would get him on a track. And because a guy that can run in this league is a difference maker. You don't have to run. Nobody's going to run like the kid in Baltimore, but he's got to be able to – he's a pocket presence guy. If the defense cheats, make them pay with your feet. He's capable of doing that. He's got a big arm.
And in that same vein, do you, even though you've got a defensive-oriented staff that's coming in, where do you think they should go when the draft comes around? They're going to have their share of things to get. So, what would you focus on?
Well, it's really unfair unless you really study this thing day in and day out, and I don't plan to. Chase Young is sitting there. He's a DeMatha kid from our area. He's a terrific talent. We're going to the 4-3. He's perfect for it. So I don't know if I would mess with that unless somebody offered me a king's ransom to come up to try to get Tua. And if they did that, then I would look at it because we need volume. We need 4 or 5 starters or potential starters to come out of this draft. We need a tight end. We need a cornerback. If Trent doesn't sign, we need a tackle. So, and a linebacker. And because going to the 4-3, not everybody's built to play middle linebacker in the 4-3, so you got to get the right guy. And there are a lot of guys out there I saw collegiately that I would be very, very interested in. But, it just depends. And this is what these guys, if Doug Williams, and Kyle Smith and that group, if they get to stay with the draft and do what they've done, they had a terrific harvest a year ago. I would expect them guys to do the right thing and make this team better.
Absolutely. And one last one for me. Now, of course, you were there with the Fun Bunch, with the Hogs, with all, during those periods of times when the Redskins were the team in D.C. And football has gone back and forth so much since then. The thing that I always remember about those Redskins teams is that there was a balance. You had the Diesel, but you also had the Smurfs, and even in the later years, you had that. You always had that balance. And in the NFL now, it seems like pass, and when I'm thinking about it, let me pass some more. To me, it's not as entertaining because there's not that balance. As somebody who's played the game and has seen the game change over the years. What's your sense of the modern NFL game now?
Well, I'm a fan of the Tennessee Titans. They remind me of what we did, and they've got a locomotive, and they're absolutely they're just unbelievably dominant with Henry. And so, unfortunately for them, they got Baltimore, second time out the tracks. And the Raven defense is formidable, but they got the kind of offense that can hog the ball and they can keep this freak of a talent on the sidelines, run that clock, and then score. And so they're formidable. I like the way they built their team. They're disciplined. They're hardcore. You want to lead with your offensive and defensive line. Those are teams I like. And so it's going to be interesting, but I wouldn't count them out.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Doc, a couple of more questions before you go. You look at the NFC East and the changes that are taking place, with new coaches. All of a sudden, Doug Peterson is the elder statesman in the division. With Washington making a change, Dallas bringing in McCarthy, and the Giants will be making a change as well. So assess the East, not just from a coaching standpoint, but moving forward next year, because everybody said whoever won the East between Philly and Dallas would probably go out in the first round. And I know Carson Wentz went down, but it did happen. Seattle went in there and took care of business, beast mode and everything else. But assess this division. How good will they be next year?
Oh, they'll recover. They got too many good players. I mean, the two best backs in football are in Dallas and New York in our division. Wentz got hurt, but I think he's legit, no doubt about it. If you look at the season that Prescott had, why they throw it so much, I have no idea. If I had Elliott in my backfield, man, I'd run him like Secretariat, but they opted out. I think they'll be better next season because it's got a lot. They have too much talent to be in this. Gallup killed us. I mean, one game Gallup gets you, the other game 19 gets you. They can do it in a number of ways, but they're so they're so confused with their culture. Jerry does a great job as an owner because he provides the best facilities, the best practice, the best everything. But I think it's counterproductive for a head coach because a coach needs to run his team. An owner can't run a team. I haven't seen it work yet. And so if McCarthy is more than capable, is a good football coach, the question is, will he get a chance to run the team? And I talk to Cowboy fans all the time in our market. I don't believe he will.
Yeah, I mean, McCarthy, it was some talk about them keeping Garrett in the organization, which I would, if I'm a coach, I don't want to come in with the former head coach there and probably some of the former offensive, coaches, and that's a tough situation. I think anybody going in, as good as McCarthy was in Green Bay, that's going to be, like you said, that's going to be a tough coaching job for him because let them go on a 2-game or 3-game losing streak, and here's Jerry on the mic coming down, and then the locker rooms and everything else under the sun. So it's going to be interesting to see there. The Giants situation, who do you see coming in there? And is this kid legit at quarterback? Because I'm not sure if he is.
Well, they call him Dimes. I really thought out of college he was the best available coming out because I like my quarterbacks to be under pressure. If you go to Ohio State, you don't ever get sacked. These superpowers, they play 3 meaningful games a year. At Duke, he must have played 7 of them. And so I thought based on what he had to work with, he got the most out of what he had. But that's just me. I want my quarterbacks to have been under some heat and see how they react. He can diagnose very well. I think he's going to be really good. The kid up in Allen, the kid up in Buffalo, I like his moxie. he's got a little Brett Favre to me. I want a guy. It's hard for a guy to come in and be 20 years old, 21 years old, and lead a bunch of grown men. But that's what you're asking these guys to do. Russell Wilson is the absolute cream of the crop.
That's right.
That's leadership. He makes it happen, and he finally got his receiver to come through. And if this kid can catch the ball, if he works on his hands in the off season, it's over, because he's just. I mean, I thought Julio was a freak. This kid is unbelievable. And so, but again,
he reminds you of Julio too, with the size, and you talk about Metcalf, with the size and
Metcalf
the speed.
Is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, so Pete Carroll has a great football culture. He gets it. He understands the staff. They have a great football culture, a lot like Baltimore, Pittsburgh, New England. There's certain teams that have great football cultures. And then there's everybody else, and you don't know what the hell's going on. The owner's trying to be is an egomaniac, and you got all these people getting involved. And it's just disruptive to winning. You got to have one voice, and it's got to be the head coach. Can't be the owner. The owner's got a damn radio show, TV show. Nobody cares what the owner's talking about. You care about what the head coach, the coordinators are talking about, and maybe they'll prove me wrong, but so far, Dallas has been an abject failure in wasting talent over politics. The guy's lost 2 Hall of Famers, Jimmy and Tuna. He's lost 2 Hall of Famers over ego. So you got to check yourself.
Yeah. Before you go, let's get your thoughts on the games this coming weekend. And the Vikings, who I thought played one of the best, and they as good as people said they were last year and this year defensively, they look really, really good against New Orleans. They go to play San Francisco, who, like you said, they're stout. That front seven is very, very good. The back end is opportunistic defensively. I think it's going to be what quarterback performs in this game, but who do you see winning this game?
Well, I think San Francisco could be the best team in football, but you got to prove it, because if you look at what Jimmy G has done, he's made plays. He was a question mark. You knew about almost everything else, but he has proven that if you don't pressure him, he'll kill you. But their defense, and now they got Staley at left tackle. The key to most of these teams, and that it ultimately hurt Seattle. You got to have your best offensive lineman in the game plan, because you got to take away one of these werewolves coming off the edge. If you can't do it, they're going to pressure you. They have 4 of them, and the way they play the game is the way I like to see the game played. And I think as a play caller, Shanahan has no equal in the National Football League. 0. I think he's the best guy at understanding how to run the ball on you, how to keep you off balance, how to move his pocket so his quarterback's not a target. So it's just up to them. I mean, Shanahan showed it. I think the guy's been grossly underrated. He did it at Texas, got to the playoffs. I never thought his dad needed him. He didn't need his dad. I thought that was a setback for him. He is now where he ought to be. Atlanta, I mean, they kind of blew it. I give the Patriots all the credit in the world. But they was walking the dog in the first half against the Patriots. For whatever reason, they got away from it, and it cost them.
Yeah, and, I think Dee Ford is a key, keeping him healthy in the playoffs, especially, being a spy, if you will, on that running back for the Vikings. It would be a key in that game. The Titans you mentioned earlier, and D. Henry, I thought, Coach Belichick got a little stubborn and saying, look, that play-action pass kills teams for Tennessee with Tannehill because of the run, so we just going to let him go crazy, and we're going to keep them from, throwing the ball 20, 30 yards down the field for big plays. And it killed them. Now, the game was close because, the Titans didn't do some other things, and they got some drives in the drive stall. But I thought the Titans could win by 14 the way they were playing, the way they were running the ball. Now they go to, unfortunately, like you said, Baltimore with the MVP, Now the only thing you might hope is that Baltimore comes out rusty and gets behind, and that's the only way it seems to be able to beat them. But who wins this game?
Well, it won't be luck. It'll be weather. You got to pray if you're Tennessee that it's sloppy. The only thing you can do to slow him down is hope nature plays to your advantage, and you got a wet track and he slips. Because if it's dry, you're in trouble. Now, they can hog the ball because Tennessee can deny access to him. And you got to make the Ravens kick field goals. And if they can limit them scores, but you're not going to outscore them. But you hold them to 3 and then pressure the Raven defense, and then you can't settle for field goals. I mean, it's a very simple game. They've got this sledgehammer, which no one has stopped. And it's going to be good. I wish they had a dome because I'd love to see this on a dry track just to see the possibilities. But anyway, it is what it is, and both teams will be on the same surface, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't think people understand how good Derrick Henry is with the speed and power. He's got deceptive speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. I mean, this guy is the truth. And the Ravens, win or lose, they got their hands full with him. On Sunday, real quick, Texans at the Chiefs. This is a rematch where Texans went into Kansas City earlier in the year and knocked off Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. The Chiefs look a little bit better, well, I should say a lot better. In particular, the defense has been playing a lot better on the backside of the regular season. Who wins this game?
Well, we have two of our guys in our secondary, former Redskins, that were in the secondary for Kansas City. And I love Andy as a person, great guy. They've just got to – They got to play. They can't play Big 12 defense in these playoff games. I mean, they got to man up.
Yeah.
And if they do that, and again, the Texans, I think O'Brien's a hell of a coach. He's got a freak in his own at quarterback who's a dual threat, but is just so competitive as he witnessed in that game. Buffalo was my pick to go through this because I just love the job they've done in Buffalo. I think if you look at youth, putting a team together, they're headed in the right direction. And you can't blow a lead in playoffs. You just can't.
Mm.
And they came back. But that kid, he's a champion. You saw it at Clemson. Deshaun is just – he's magnificent. And he had one of his weapons that he can play. If he can ever get both his receivers healthy, you're in absolute trouble because – the guy is fantastic. He's the best quarterback that does not get his due, in my opinion, that I've seen in pro football this season.
Yeah, and you're talking about Fuller, and I think he's going to play against the Chiefs, so that makes it even more interesting. And Tony and I were just talking about that before you came on, about how, Watson's a winner. He's been a winner in high school. He won a championship at Clemson. Why not? Why would people expect anything less for him being a leader? And like you said, the freakish way, he could throw the ball on a dime, and he can scramble and run the ball. So that's going to be an interesting matchup. The final game, Seattle at Green Bay. You mentioned Russell Wilson, who showed out again. He's not going to kill you 400 yards passing or all that. But when you put pressure on him, he knows what to do. He limited his mistakes. He don't throw a lot of turnovers or interceptions or fumbles. They go to a Green Bay team, Doc, that I think has been kind of off and on. I don't even know really what the Packers' signature win has been this year. So, Seahawks, I think, have a very good chance to go in there and beat Green Bay.
Yeah, the Seahawks really blew it. You can't be on your doorstep and not score against the Niners. They have home field throughout.
Right.
They really were the big dog in the NFC. They blew it. But they're so mature. They have, like I said, a great football culture. The Packers have to show me that they have. Aaron's Aaron, but he needs help. And I don't know if they have enough help. They have the tight ends that have great name value. They've been great in the past. But I haven't seen anybody really bust out and show me that they can take over a game. Aaron needs some help. He really does. And they got to have somebody that he can go to And I'm not certain. We played them. I saw them up close. Respect the hell out of them. But they need Mother Nature. And, again, so it's going to be cold. The Seahawks play in slop all the time. There's no big thing to them. So they really caught the wrong team to come in. I don't think the weather's going to affect the Seahawks. And then you got to deal with Russell. And I just have never seen anybody. He's Fran Tarkenton with a gun. And it's just, I have to see somebody beat them before I believe it.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to who runs the ball well too. And the Seahawks are 8-1 on the road this year. 8-1. They play better on the road than at home. So that'll be interesting. Doc, before you go, we appreciate your time. Let people know how they can follow you and talk about your program, sir.
Well, I'm on Twitter, Rick Doc Walker on Twitter, and holler at me, man. You want to talk some ball, and we can do it, man. We rock and roll, man. We're never off. It's 24/7, 365.
And your show?
Yeah, Doc and Galdi with 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Team 980 app. It's on the app. Get the app. It's free, and we have a good time with it because Galdi is he's a freak with numbers, and so the analytics. I mean, this kid, ever since I've known him, he's been all about the numbers, and really, the game has transcended to the point now where, everybody has an analytic department. It's a whole new era that we're going through, and people are hiring people now based on numbers, not gut. I'm from the gut feel era. It's a whole new thing now. People looking at their laptops and figuring things out. So I'm going to remain old school till death do me part. But in the meantime, I do respect the fact that these numbers do make sense. Doc,
as always, sir, we appreciate you. Happy New Year to you. God bless. And keep doing what you're doing. We thank you so much, man. Great insight.
Hey, good to be on the West Coast, man. All my Bruins out there, Holland, we got to get back on the winning tracks, man. This is awful what's been going on. So hopefully the boys will turn it around.
We'll see. Doc
All
Walker,
right,
appreciate you, man. Thank you, sir.
Peace.
All right. Rick Doc Walker on the Batchelor News radio show. Going to take a 30-second break and wrapped up my good friend Tony T. Mac McClain on the Batchelor News radio show. Welcome back to the Batchelor News radio show. Thanks to all of our guests, Humphrey, Chief of Police, Little Rock, Arkansas, Dr. Peter Mansoor, talking foreign affairs, Lut Williams, the publisher of the Black College Sports page, and, of course, Rick Doc Walker, who covers the Washington Football Club and has his own show, 10 a.m. during the week on the app, MASN app. You can check it out. Back to wrap it up, LA Batchelor alongside Tony T. Mac McClain. And Tony, just to kind of get a rewind with what Lut Williams has said first, and is twofold. He was talking about in terms of the coaching and at the HBCU level and the talent that you see. And it's almost as like he's saying the coaching, if you have the right coach, you can have mediocre talent and do well, as opposed to having the great talent and a mediocre coach.
Yeah, well, Well, see, the thing is, especially now with college ball, you still got to recruit. It's you still have to be able to recruit. Now, Lord knows it always helps if you can coach a little bit, if you can do the X's and O's. He makes Lou always makes mention of Coach Moten down in Central, and to me, he's one of the best coaches, not just on the HBCU. He's just one of the best coaches in the country because he can coach. He's great X's. He's great with X's and O's, and he can recruit. And I think the fact that he is an alumni, I think he uses it to his advantage to the extent of he knows the culture, and he respects the culture, and he makes sure that the kids respect the culture as well. And that gets lost in the sauce because there's so many schools, just on the Division I level. You're talking 200-300 schools, and with all the conference jockeying and everything else, tradition is they sort of use tradition when it's convenient for them. But I think, to me, he's very old school in the sense of you're going to respect the culture, and we're going to make sure that you get an education while you're here. And we see that more so in the HBCUs as it is anyway, between the nurturing and everything else. But yeah, to me, Moten and others are a perfect example of what the HBCUs have to do. Now, it's twofold because the schools have to commit to them as well.
Right. Do you get the sense, though, and this is what I wanted to, we ran out of time in terms of asking Lut this, but do you get the sense that in this year of just to start the basketball season at the D1 level, that you had so many number ones? Remember, these are 18-year-old, 19-year-old kids. So many number ones to start the year. Do you get the sense that this is the year of upset? And if that's so, when you get some HBCUs in the big dance, that maybe they go further this year because of the year of the upset?
If they treat them on the same level playing field, and see, therein lies the problem. They usually don't get that benefit of the doubt. That's why, I brought up the FAMU win, because see, what will wind up happening is people will say, well, Iowa State wasn't really all that good this year, so that's not that big of a win. And then, it works twofold. They already mentally are putting these teams in either the play-in games, or maybe they'll give them a 13 or 14 seed, and even that is usually pushing it or so. But I think if nothing else, it's just going to make for a more exciting tournament because there is no clear number one team. And to be quite honest with you, it's probably, we almost shouldn't be surprised when we have these many number ones this early, because it's non-conference and these teams are still trying to work themselves out. We talked about it when he does the previews for the HBCU teams. He's doing that thing in June, and usually by the time you get to Midnight Madness in October, the rosters have gone through a crazy metamorphosis.
I would think if everything plays out like that, the way we want it to, in terms of making sure that the NCAA treats them right, treats the HBCU right, and they have a bunch of upsets, I think it digresses, because then the NCAA, well, let's take a step back, then the Dukes of the world don't want to schedule Central or A&T because they're worried about getting beat early or in the regular season, and then in the big dance, the NCAA, continues to pit the HBCUs and the playing games and everything else, or makes sure, even if they had the greatest season of all time, puts them at the 16 seed, so they can try to ensure that these upsets that may come this year won't happen again. It's almost like the President Obama effect. Okay, look, we had this black dude. We got to make sure we can't have another of these black guys in office. So we got to ensure this doesn't happen again.
Well, look, I've always felt like after Butler almost beat Duke, and it was off the heels of George Mason making their run, I really think the NCAA sort of just said, you know what, enough of this, because we really, I mean, we saw it to a certain extent with Loyola, getting to the final. But Loyola was a good team. Loyola wasn't really a Cinderella as far as I'm concerned. But Loyola has just been a very good program. It's sort of like Gonzaga. Gonzaga, you get to be Cinderella for 1 year, and then when you're a consistent win, you're not Cinderella anymore. You're a power. You become a made man, so to speak. Sort of like what we saw, Clemson do that on the football side. But again, a lot of it at the end of the day is going to go back to whether there is or isn't a level playing field, and we sort of know that, especially on the hoop level, it's not. And because, like you said, they get it both ways. Most of these schools will only play. Most of the white schools will only play the black schools when they know they can beat them. That's why they avoided Big House and John McClendon and all those guys back in the day. That's still there. And even when you do get, remember when Central beat NC State a couple of years back, and you had with FAMU doing what they were able to do the other night. They go out, instead of saying, hey, these guys are quality teams, say, well, you didn't beat anybody that good. It's always going to be a qualifier, no matter what.
Yeah, and you look at what Doc Walker mentioned, a couple of things. Number one, he talked about the culture of a franchise, and I know he covers Washington, so he's not gonna kill Daniel Snyder, but Daniel Snyder and Jerry Jones are one and the same. Jones might do a little bit more in terms of facilities or whatever, and they have more talent or whatever. But they're both Budinskis, right? They both they don't want to write checks and sit down and just let, coaches and general managers do what they need to do. And so the culture won't change in those areas until they have a culture of one voice, one person, having that discipline and making sure that when the players know at the end of the day, up to and over to the owner, know at the end of the day that the coach has the best interest of the franchise, and if you allow him to do his job, certainly success can happen. But you don't see that in Dallas. You don't see that in Washington. You do see that, as he mentioned, some of the other programs. But talk about what he mentioned about the culture, because that also goes to draft picks. You got 5 or 6 different hands in the cookie jar. You can't get the picks that you want, or the picks that need to play and the picks that need to sit.
And the thing about it is, say what you want, they both made good hires. I think Mike McCarthy will do well in Dallas if Jerry doesn't leave them the hell alone. But it's funny. We always heard, we heard that quote earlier this year with Sam Darnold. Darnold, the Jets quarterback, saying, "I'm seeing ghosts," and Jerry's been chasing ghosts since he let Jimmy go.
Right.
And until he literally lets the guy coach and whatever, it's going to be a problem. And it's now Snyder is annoying too. I don't believe he has the coaches show or pregame show or whatever, but he's been sort of agitator involved in with the draft. We saw what happened with Griffin. We saw it with to a certain extent. We saw it with some of the other picks. Now, it appears that at least from what I can gather, Doug Williams had a lot more to say on Haskins getting drafted than folks are willing to admit. That's why I sort of made the analogy that he could be next year's Jackson if they make the commitment. But see, again, that goes back to Snyder. Steve Biscotti is hands off, but he has a presence, but he's hands off. He's just basically he leaves it to his football folks. Now, luckily, he had a great football mind there with Ozzie all those years, and he let Ozzie do his thing, and it showed with the level of success and the Super Bowls to match. Snyder doesn't have that in his repertoire as of yet, and you would think that that he would want to sit back. But see, what's going on with both of these teams is that they treat their teams more like commodities than they do actual teams, and therein lies the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's just amazing that Jerry and his ego could think that his coach's show would be more important, and think that it would be more important than anything else that the Cowboys are doing. Like, do you really want to win? And I always bring up George Steinbrenner, love him or hate him. He was a blowhard, but he put his players on the field and for the most part, especially in the latter years, very latter years, try to stay out of the way of some of those decisions.
Yeah, but it took him 20 damn years before he. And look, I will always contend that if he never got suspended from baseball the second time, you might not have had the core four that you had, because you basically had the team left alone, and you had Bob Watson and Gene Michael. Build that team. So I hear what you're saying, but Steinbrenner blew more titles than he won.
Yeah, that's true. I mean that I can't deny that. Just let's go back on the field and talk about the game, the broadcast, the championship game at the time of this broadcast, Clemson and LSU.
That game is next week, bro.
I did say that. Didn't I say the 13th?
Yeah, it's next week. Yeah, it's next week.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we could talk about it more next week. But you look at them in terms of the matchups. Clemson, I thought, was very fortunate, and LSU just seems like nobody seems to slow them down. And Doc gave sort of his answer. We'll wait for next week to give our answers. But what do you think in terms of the matchup? Because Clemson notoriously defensively can get after quarterbacks. But LSU so far, and they played in a very competitive SEC conference, they haven't been slowed down.
If there's any defense that could slow them down, it is Clemson's, because they're and see, I want to see when Burrow has to sort of take a couple of hits, because he's basically been able to just sort of do what he wants and do as he pleases. I do think LSU is the better team, but I think Clemson will give them a game. I know. Let's put it this way: I don't think that it's going to be over at the half like it was against Oklahoma. I think Clemson will definitely keep it close, and I think Clemson, a couple plays here, a couple plays there, could make it a game. And again, Clemson can run the ball. Etienne is as for as good as he is, he's a very underrated running back.
Yeah, and then they got a quarterback that can run the ball too. So Unlike Joe Morrow, who will stand in the pocket, he hasn't. I mean, he's run. We've seen him on third and short and stuff like that.
But he doesn't need to. He doesn't.
Right, he doesn't need to. He's got 100 wide receivers and 500 running backs. That, not to take anything away from him, but he definitely has the advantage as the skill positions. I would think. All right, NFL. Get your thoughts. Vikings at 49ers. Both teams run the ball really well. Both teams can get after the quarterback and play good defense. It's in San Fran. Who wins?
I like San Fran. I think San Fran. I mean, I think the Vikings keep it close, but I think they just beat up on them more than anything else.
Yeah, they all excited that Kirk Cousins had a pedestrian game and he didn't cost his team and they actually won. All of a sudden the curse is over. He's a bona fide superstar now. And, after winning one game, and of course it was about the running back. It certainly wasn't about him, but that's what the mainstream does.
Sort of like after Romo won his first game too.
Right, that one game, by the way, that Romo won in the playoffs. Titans at the Ravens. Derrick Henry's a man's man. I don't care if the Titans put 8 guys, 9 guys, 10 guys in the box. The way Tennessee runs and that zone run they do, and the way how strong he is. People don't understand how strong he is. You just can't. He's like Earl Campbell in the sense that he just kind of bounces off people. Like they hit him and they just kind of bounce off. Earl. So who wins this game in Baltimore?
They keep it close, but I think Baltimore. Baltimore wins. I think Baltimore wins, but it's not going to be a cakewalk. It's going to, because, they're probably a little bit more similar than we give them credit for. And, I think Mark Ingram will be motivated as well because of all the hype that Henry's getting.
Hypothetical, someone asked me if the game was in Tennessee, would Tennessee upset Baltimore?
No.
Okay.
I mean, look. See, some hypercritical, some hypothetical. They didn't earn the right. That's why they're in the wild card game.
Right.
That's why in the wild card game. You take care of regular season. You don't have to play 3 games to get to the Super Bowl. So, Baltimore was the best team in the AFC this year. They earned the right to have that game in Baltimore. Plain and simple.
Right. Yeah. And what I do like though is the AFC South beat the AFC East, and right now you got 3 black quarterbacks in the AFC playing in these championship games. I mean, in these division and of course championship games moving forward. Texans, speaking of one of them, Deshaun Watson at Kansas City, as I mentioned earlier. This is a rematch of a game that was early in the year. The Texans have been one of those feast or famine teams, and not to discredit Deshaun Watson, but the team in general. I think it has a lot to do with coaching, where they play down to teams they should beat, and then play up to teams that should beat them. But they're on the road against Kansas City. Who wins?
I like the Texans because I don't trust Kansas City's defense. I love their offense, but if it becomes a shootout, I think Deshaun could, even with the limited weapons, even with not having the same amount of weapons as Mahomes, I think they could go in there and again, they're not afraid. They already came in there and won. So yeah, I could very easy. I think I'm gonna go with the Texans in the upset.
It's funny because I think these two teams are the 2 teams, albeit Texans got blown out by Baltimore, and the Chiefs survived Baltimore both early games in this year. But I think these are the 2 teams. If anybody can beat Baltimore, it could be one of these teams. I think that the winner of those has a legitimate shot, assuming Baltimore beats Tennessee, to go in there and upset the Ravens.
I mean, it's basically going to me. I think both KC's offense is definitely better. But Houston's defense is much better than Kansas City's. The fact that they basically had to sort of get somebody like Terrell Suggs off of his comfy couch, sort of speaks to where the defense is.
Yeah, they've been playing a lot better, but yeah, and I'm not gonna get into. I don't trust Andy Reid a lot, just especially with the Patriots out. I just don't trust Andy Reid.
Yeah.
So we'll see, and then final game of the weekend, Seattle at the Packers. As I mentioned, how do you not trust Russell Wilson on the road in this big game? Nobody's kind of giving him a chance to win 3 games and get to the Super Bowl, but they've been there before, and in Russ we trust. That's what a lot of people are saying, and this is a Packer team that's just been up and down. They struggled against a weary Washington team. They struggled against Chicago and some other teams they should have dominated. They run the ball well, but I don't know about that defense as well, especially on the backside with Russell and Beast Mode giving him that physicality back. He only got to run for 30 yards or 35, but it'll be 35 powerful yards and physical yards that Seattle can use.
The only team that was phonier than the Patriots this year were the Packers, and I think Seattle can go in there and beat them.
So the way you're looking now, you got the 49ers and Ravens top seeds winning, with the Texans and Seahawks going in there for those respective championships the following week. It'll be interesting because, both Seattle and Houston have quarterbacks that are dynamic who can go in there and just get it done. So it'll be interesting to see. T-Mac, as I said, Happy New Year to my friend. Next time we'll talk, we'll get into some baseball, a lot of interesting stuff coming up with that, and recap the weekend International Football League. Thank you, sir.
Take care, man.
Appreciate you. Tony T. Mac McLean from BASN on the Batchelor News Radio Show.
Yeah. Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was crazy. Can we do it again? 6 in the morning, boy, I'm so hungry. Appetite's calling, starving still. Love me so long, you put it on me. Now I can't wait, I need a taste of you. Temperature's rise, your body is fire. So don't make me wait, I need you right here. So I'm doing
your body right here with me, 'cause you know just what I'm gonna do. I'ma whisper in your ear and say those freaky things to you. Temperature rise, your body is fire, and I'ma give you all of this love. So come here, baby, let me drive you crazy. I hope you're ready. Come and let me for some more like that, girl. Boomerang, boomerang, boomerang. You know how when it feels like that, girl. Going down like that. Gonna work the front to back. 'Cause I ain't the fleet.
Gentlemen, let's get down to business.
different guy, and I don't compare to many. But next to her, I'm plain ordinary. Not many can see the light blue aura that surrounds the girl wherever in the world. She's a 9, a 10, a 20, 50. She's bittersweet and a taco treat. She's great, and I like it. Just the way she is.
can almost see her glowing. Then she turns the light on you. Electricity is flowing now. Got a taste for something new. You'll be thinking about her all night long till your mind is black and blue. 'Cause she started something growing strong, and you got to see it.